All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into something that I know a lot of you have been thinking about, and that's algorithm memorization.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of questions about it. And we found this great article. It's called Why Algorithm Memorization is Overrated in Tech Interviews. And it really got us thinking. So is it really all about just grinding leet code until, you're dreaming in binary trees?
Well, I think the pressure is definitely there.
Oh, yes.
Right? You see all these people talking about, doing hundreds of leak code problems, and you feel like you have to do that to even have a chance.
Yeah. It's like, if I don't do that, am I even going to get in the door?
Right.
So how much of it is hype and how much of it is like real practical advice?
That's the big question. And I think part of the problem is that it creates this sort of false sense of what's actually important. It's like, if you're building a house, you wouldn't just memorize the entire building code, right? You'd want someone who actually understands the principles of structural engineering, can apply them creatively, to solve whatever challenges come up.
Definitely. Like, what happens when the foundation starts cracking?
Yeah.
And you just memorized,
Exactly.
the building code, you're not going to be able to fix it.
Yeah, and I think that's where this whole algorithm memorization thing kind of falls apart.
Right.
Because in the real world, you're rarely building algorithms from scratch, right? It's more about understanding the tools and principles and then being able to adapt them to different situations to solve unique problems.
So it's less about having like a mental library of algorithms and more about like having the skills to know which algorithm you need.
Exactly. It's like a chef, right? They don't just stand in the kitchen and recite recipes from memory.
Yeah.
They understand flavors. They understand techniques they can adapt based on, the ingredients they have. And I think in tech, that's where understanding things like time and space complexity come in.
Okay. So time and space complexity, those always sounded really intimidating to me, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Can you break those down? Like, explain it to me like I'm 5.
Absolutely. So imagine you're baking a cake. Okay. Time complexity is basically how long it takes to bake that cake. And as you make a bigger cake, it's going to take longer, right?
Makes sense.
Space complexity is like how much counter space you need. A bigger cake needs more space.
Got it.
So it's not just enough to know the recipe. You have to know, how efficient is it? How long is it going to take? How much space am I going to need?
Okay. That makes so much more sense. Thank you for breaking it down like that.
Of course.
And the article also talks about how overemphasizing memorization can actually kind of hurt you as a developer.
Yes. It can lead to what we call a fixed mindset.
Okay.
Where you believe that your ability is limited to what you can recall. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who's capable of, continuous learning and growth. And that can be really dangerous, especially in tech.
Right.
Because new languages are coming out all the time, frameworks, new technologies.
Oh, absolutely. It's like if you thought that you were done learning language once you knew the alphabet.
Exactly.
And you never learned any, vocabulary or how to, put sentences together or write a story.
And that's where I think companies are doing themselves a disservice.
Okay.
By focusing solely on, algorithm recall. They might be missing out on some great talent.
Right.
Because they're overlooking all these other vital skills.
Okay. So it's not just about the algorithms. What are they missing out on? What are those other skills?
Well, things like problem solving, coding proficiency, system design, and maybe most importantly, adaptability.
Right. Because if everything's changing so quickly,
you
need to be able to, learn those new things.
Absolutely.
So if it's not about memorizing every algorithm under the sun, what are companies really looking for in candidates? What actually matters?
One thing that I think is really important is how a candidate approaches a problem. Can they break it down? Can they think about different approaches? Can they, communicate their thought process clearly?
Okay, so it's like show your work, not just the answer.
Exactly.
Okay.
And speaking of showing your work, let's not forget coding proficiency.
Right.
Being able to write clean code, maintainable code, that's essential.
That's like the difference between a gourmet meal and a pile of ingredients, right?
Well, it's more like the difference between a well-organized kitchen and one where everything's just chaotic.
Got it.
Right.
Because clean code, it's easier to understand, it's easier to debug, it's easier to work with.
Exactly.
And what about system design? I've heard that's a really big deal, especially for more senior roles.
Absolutely. As you move up, the ladder, so to speak, the focus shifts from individual components to like the bigger picture. So it's like the difference between, building a single-family home versus designing a skyscraper.
Wow. Okay. That's a big difference.
Right.
So you have to be able to think on a much larger scale.
Yeah, you have to think about scalability, reliability, security, all of those things.
So it seems like we're talking about like a bigger idea here.
Yeah.
It's that there's so much more to evaluating a candidate than just how many algorithms they can spit out.
Absolutely. It's a more holistic approach.
Mm.
It's about taking into account the specific needs of the role and using a variety of methods to get a really well-rounded picture of, the candidate's potential.
It's like being a great developer is about so much more than just being able to write code.
Exactly.
About problem solving, communication, collaboration, adaptability, and like we said, that continuous learning.
It's about the human element.
Yeah. And I think like a lot of times we get so caught up in the technical side of things that we forget about like the human side.
Yeah, and that's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Because we need to be focused on finding the right fit.
Okay.
People who are passionate, curious, excited to learn, to contribute to the team.
So it's not just about can you solve this obscure algorithm? It's like, are you a lifelong learner?
Exactly.
Are you excited to learn new things? Are you excited to like, grow with us?
Going to be a good fit for the team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established that rote algorithm memorization might not be the be-all and end-all of tech success, but I'm sure everyone listening is like, okay, but algorithms are still important, right?
Of course they are.
Okay, good.
But the key is to shift the focus from pure memorization to understanding and application. It's like knowing the grammar rules of a language. It allows you to express yourself creatively, not just recite pre-written sentences.
So it's not just about the how, it's about the why.
Exactly.
Okay. So how do we apply this to interview prep? Especially because there's all these platforms like Algo Expert and LeetCode that are so popular.
Yeah, and they can be incredibly valuable, but I think it's about using them strategically.
Okay.
Don't just race to solve as many problems as possible. Take the time to understand the why behind each solution.
So don't treat it like a checklist.
Right. Really dive deep into the nuances of each algorithm, how it works.
Okay. So that sounds a lot more engaging than just like memorizing a bunch of code.
It is. And also, don't just stop at one solution. Explore different approaches.
Okay.
Compare their efficiencies, analyze the trade-offs.
Interesting.
And, a lot of these platforms have interactive features, visualizations, step-by-step explanations, even, AI-powered assistance. Use those.
It's like having a virtual mentor, like
Yeah.
guiding you through the process.
It is. And, don't limit yourself to just algorithm problems.
Okay.
Branch out. Look at system design questions, object-oriented design, debugging exercises, code refactoring challenges.
So embrace the challenge, dive deep into the why, and use all the tools available. This has been so helpful, I think, for me even, but I'm sure everyone listening is really eager to hear more about those like alternative interview approaches and like how to really, cultivate that growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to dive into all of that in part 2.
It's funny when you think about it. It's like we try to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree with these rapid-fire coding challenges in interviews.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's like trying to cram this complex, nuanced evaluation into like a 45-minute whiteboard coding sprint.
Right, and the article actually suggested some alternative approaches that seem way more in line with what you'd actually be doing.
Yeah, like take-home projects.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of that 45-minute sprint, give them something that's a little more like what they would be doing day to day.
Right, give them a chance to show their coding style and how they think through problems and like document their work, which is huge
Absolutely.
in the real world.
It lets them showcase their creativity and problem solving in a way that a timed test just can't. And another one that they talked about was pair programming sessions as part of the interview.
I've heard of those, but to be honest, the thought of coding with someone like looking over my shoulder just makes me nervous.
It can be intimidating for sure,
Yeah.
but it's also like a really valuable opportunity for both sides.
Okay.
The company gets to see how you collaborate, how you communicate, your problem-solving process in real time, how you handle feedback.
Right. And then from the candidate side, you kind of get to experience what it's like to work with the team.
Exactly.
So it's like a win-win
It is.
to see if it's actually a good fit.
Yeah, and then for roles where code quality is really important, They suggested incorporating code review exercises,
Oh, that's interesting.
like being able to read and understand someone else's code and spot issues, suggest improvements.
Right, because that is a big part.
It is a huge part of a developer's job.
Yeah, it's like being a detective almost, looking for clues,
Absolutely.
piecing together the story of the code.
Yeah, and that's often overlooked in traditional interviews.
Totally.
And another one, particularly for senior roles, was really in-depth system design discussions.
Okay, so that's where it gets really interesting because now you're not just like writing lines of code.
Right.
You're architecting these huge systems
Yeah.
that have to handle like real-world traffic and data and all these complex requirements.
It's like building a house versus designing a skyscraper.
Totally.
You got to think about scalability, reliability, security.
Mhm.
How to design a system that can not only function, but thrive.
Yeah, so it seems like all of this is pointing to this bigger idea that there's so much more to evaluating a candidate than just can they remember this algorithm or can they write this, function.
Absolutely. It's about looking at the whole picture,
Yeah.
taking a more holistic approach and really figuring out what is it that this particular role needs and how can we use all these different methods to get a good sense of this person's potential.
Right. It's like recognizing that being a good developer, it's not just about the code.
Mhm.
It's about problem solving, communication, collaboration, adaptability,
Continuous learning.
continuous learning. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think we get so caught up in like the technical stuff
Yeah.
that we forget about the human element.
Absolutely. And I think that's a disservice to both the candidates and the companies
Yeah.
because we should be focused on finding the right fit,
Mm-hmm.
people who are passionate, curious, excited to be there and to contribute to the team.
So it's not just like, can you solve this obscure algorithm? It's like, are you a lifelong learner? Are you someone who we want to work with?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so this has been so eye-opening.
Yeah.
I'm already feeling like way more optimistic about the future of tech interviews, but I think we have to address like the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
What about the person who is preparing for these interviews?
Yeah.
Who is like feeling that pressure to cram algorithms and, is there a better way?
Yeah. How can they navigate this landscape and not just survive, but thrive?
Yeah, what can we do? All right, so welcome back to the deep dive. We've been unpacking this whole algorithm memorization thing, talking about the limits of just rote learning and brainstorming some other ways to approach tech interviews.
Right. Trying to think outside the box a little.
Yeah, but now I think it's time to kind of turn the focus to you, the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what can you actually do
Right.
to navigate this whole world?
I think that's where this idea of continuous learning comes in.
Okay.
It's not just about prepping for the interview. It's about kind of this mindset shift.
Right, it doesn't stop once you get the job.
Exactly.
You have to keep learning.
It's like constantly seeking out new knowledge and new skills and new challenges.
Okay, so how do we actually do that, though?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day.
I think side projects are a really great way to do that.
Okay.
Because they give you that freedom to experiment, to learn new technologies,
Yeah.
to build something you're passionate about outside of maybe the constraints of a work project.
It's like that feeling of when you first learned to code,
Yeah.
and you just like built something for fun and you were so excited to see it work.
Absolutely. And you're in control.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get to choose the project. You set the pace. You get to dive deep into things that you might not even get to touch in your day job.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so side projects, and then what about open source?
Open source is amazing because you get to learn from more experienced developers.
Okay.
You get to sharpen your skills and you become part of this huge global community.
I'll be honest, that always felt kind of intimidating to me.
Yeah.
Like, what if my code's not good enough?
I think everyone feels that way at first.
Yeah.
But the open source community is so welcoming, especially to new people.
Okay.
There are projects of all different sizes and complexities, so you don't have to be, this coding wizard to contribute.
Start small.
Start small. Find a project that aligns with what you're interested in.
Okay.
And just start, contributing.
And there's so much value in that,
Yeah.
right? Like working with a real code base
Oh, tons.
and collaborating.
Yeah, and seeing your work being used by other people,
Oh, yeah.
it's really rewarding.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've got side projects, we've got open source,
Mm-hmm.
but how do we stay on top of everything that's changing?
Right, because there's new stuff coming out all the time.
Constantly. I feel like I'm always behind.
I think the key is to be really intentional about the information you're taking in.
Okay.
So instead of trying to consume everything, find a few blogs, podcasts, newsletters, online communities that you really trust that you find valuable and just focus on those.
So it's like create your own personalized learning plan.
Exactly. Curate that information.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to experiment. Try different things. See what works for you.
Yeah. And be willing to adapt, like we were saying.
Mm-hmm.
This has been so refreshing, honestly.
Yeah.
Feels like we've reframed this whole idea of what it means to be successful in tech.
Oh.
It's not about memorizing facts. It's about understanding concepts.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about acing one interview. It's about cultivating this like lifelong love of learning.
And that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah,
Because it means that we can always be learning and growing.
it's limitless.
Limitless.
So as we wrap up, I just want to leave everyone listening with one thought.
Okay.
Let's create a culture that celebrates continuous learning and curiosity
Yes.
and supports each other on this journey of growth and discovery.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening, everybody.